Awakened from torpor at last, it's Feature Please, a heinous trip at Warp 5. My name is Joseph.
And I'm your treacherous co-host, Peter.
Peter, I am just filled with anticipation as to exactly how you're going to characterize this episode by merely introducing what we watched this week. So, please tell me, what is it that we viewed so that we might review it for our fans across the world?
Why, we watched the very first good episode of Star Trek Enterprise Season 2. Ceasefire.
You
Season
said
2.
it! You used its true name! Like, it earned it back!
Absolutely. Season 2, Episode 15. This came out February 12th, 2003. A little early Valentine's Day present to the 6 people still watching Enterprise at this point. Written by Chris Black, directed by David Stryton. Chris Black. You know, there's some old names that we've talked about heavily because of their deep involvement with Voyager, specifically David Livingston, Phyllis Strong, Mike Sussman, who I was unaware that they're actually co-producers of Enterprise at this point.
Oh, okay. That makes a lot of sense why we keep seeing them.
Chris Black, though, 14 credits writing as Enterprise, and he's going to go on to become a supervising producer later on. To this guy's credit, Rogue Planet, which, good premise, crappy delivery. Fallen Hero, which I didn't really super care for, but I thought we got some pretty decent Vulcan world building, right?
Mm-hmm.
2 Days and 2 Nights, meh. Carbon Creek, surprisingly okay. Again, a strong entry into Vulcan. Singular.
Yeah, not a terrible episode, just really bizarre placement in the canon.
Singularity, which was that the annoying craziness?
Yeah, that was the one where they're getting close to the black hole and they all start being really bitchy. So that
OCD.
That one's a super miss.
But now here we are at Ceasefire. And I feel like Star Trek Enterprise has finally showed up to work sober in TV land for the first time in half a season.
It's been a long road.
A long road.
Yeah.
My wife, by the way, the fact that she knows the fucking song just from like the intro music that plays when I cue it up, not the actual full introduction, but like there's a little segment that plays on the menu select. And she's not happy she knows the words, but
yeah,
I'll bait her into it. We'll be driving. I'll be like, "Oh, it's been a long, and I see instantly like the disdain in her mouth. Like she like spits the words out. Like, such a bad song. I'm like, yeah, well, you should listen to the good version on our podcast.
The fact that we are more than halfway through this season, we have waded through some of the biggest turkeys you and I have ever watched to finally get to a spot where like Enterprise figured out, oh, this is what the show's actually supposed to be about. Holy shit. This is the story that sold everyone on the prospect of doing the show to begin with. Okay. All right. Well, turns out this is pretty fucking good.
Did they take this long to figure out that's what the show is? Or is that just the fucking hubris, the sheer fucking hubris of the executive producers? Like, you take electronic dance music, EDM, right? And you're waiting for the beat to drop and it just drags out way too long. You're like, come on, man, just drop the fucking beat already. I almost feel like that's what this season is. Like, we know what you want, we know what works, but we're going to make you slog through so much dog shit under the assumption that, hey, you're all still going to be here 15 fucking episodes into season 2 when we finally get around to going anywhere near what you signed up for.
Right. They knew this is the formula. The best episodes of season 1 were attached to this formula in one way or another. And not just talking about Shran, although that's a big part of it, but they know what the sauce is, and they didn't bother to touch it from the season premiere to episode 15. Not once. Not one fucking time. I don't know if that's hubris. I don't know if that's malfeasance. I don't know if that's incompetence. But it's
Negligence.
inexcusable. And who the fuck is still watching this show at this point, given this? Like, is it any surprise why the ratings felt like a rock? If it took this long to get to something where a real fan who's invested in your show finally has something to, like, hang on to. Bizarre.
Imagine
Bizarre.
being the diehard fan who has actually been able to slog it out up to this point, and then going to your friends at schools and be like, dudes, I know you guys all quit watching Enterprise like 10 episodes ago, but man, it's good now. Like, trust me, dude, it's good. It's back. Like, if I was in high school or college and I had tried giving this thing a go and I had sworn it off, and then you or anybody else came back to me like, no, man, fuck off. Fuck you. I'm not going back to that shit. Like, right. Absolutely not. They went out of their way to lose me. And I almost have to wonder, it's something we bring up frequently. Is this objectively good, or does this seem as good as great? I give this a great rating. Spoiler alert. Did I class this as great in my 5-point scale, 5 out of 5, because it's been so terrible up to this point, and I'm desperate?
I think it was actually great. This one was actually great. I see where you're going, where is the low expectations making it so that anything that's competent, we're just grading to higher. I do think that everything about this episode really worked. I feel like all of the characters, even from like Phlox having one scene, right? Like his one scene is good. Even Trip's actions and decision making ends up being very like effective within the plot and conveys things about where he's, how he's grown as a character. These are the smallest pieces of the puzzle. This is good, and as someone who knows what happens after this, is really fun because this is just one more brick into the building of the best parts of the show. Like, all of this stuff continues to be relevant deep into the run. Everything that happened here, how all of these personalities interact, it continues to build and pay off later on. And from everything from like the history of like what's going on with the Vulcans to the interactions with Andoria to the clear indication of like there is a purpose to humanity and a reason why the Federation is formed and why they formed it. They put that on the table. That's the premise of the show. Finally is here. Finally delivered, right?
Let me cut to the V'ger Please Enterprise series rip. If Enterprise had been hot shit out of the gate and been able to maintain a TNG or better episode quality through all 4 seasons, let's say that every episode is able to hover somewhere around with what we just watched here, do you think it would have made a difference, or do you think that Enterprise still would have had its show canceled at season 4 because of the UPN collapse? Would UPN even have collapsed had Enterprise been able to bring in TNG numbers?
Excellent question. Not to get too far into this particular set of weeds, because we will have the rips to discuss these things as we go through the story of the production and how things changed. And as they neared season 4, they had a real sense that they were in trouble of just kind of getting the plug pulled because the merger. And the reason why they knew that was not just the ratings. It was the new network that was going to be formed was not in the demo for Trek, because Trek's audience is older, and the company that was going to be formed between the UPN WB merger, the CW, was intentionally aligned to go for the money demo alone, and that just did not include Star Trek at that point. So it could be that even a very successful, very well done, very critically well regarded Enterprise still would have gotten canceled. I think more interesting is the idea of if Enterprise did well and UPN continued to do well and there was still demand for the programming block, would it have even ended up merging?
Hmm.
That is, I think, more likely, is if it had more success as a programming block because things like Enterprise were doing very well, then maybe it gets to season 5, which is what they were trying for, because whatever merger ends up happening happens in the future, because there's just enough money to go around that no one's going that direction yet.
So, speaking of desolate, bombed out catastrophes, we open in a sweeping nighttime shot of Ukraine battlefront.
Yeah, it's like, yeah, this is what was it, Kherson or something like that. So
This is Earth post Terminator Judgment Day. It is rubble, rubble, and more rubble, and sparsed out among this apocalyptic wasteland is some laser beams flying around. We're in an active war zone, Joe.
when they zoom in the effect shot into an airplane hangar looking building, and that's when you find out this episode doesn't have not one special guest star, not two special guest stars. It's got 3 special guest stars. The secret special guest star being
Giant ass Susie Plaxton.
Susie Plaxton, the statuesque baby mama of Worf, and very unfortunately Susie Q from our days in Voyager. Yeah, I know. But hey, nice redemption arc here for Susie Plaxton to make a statuesque appearance as
Amazon.
as a female Andorian named Tara, who is a subordinate to our boy Shran, who's also here. They are clearly locked in some kind of fight with the Vulcans on this planet. That is who their antagonist is. Things are not going super great. There's some kind of battlefield deployments occurring, and the Vulcans are sending signals that they'd be interested in talking about a ceasefire. But Shran, he doesn't want to try and deal with the treacherous Vulcans himself. He happens to know a pink skin that is a square dealer from his prior encounters with him, and requests that they get Archer on the scene. It's a great.
It's roll the credits.
Yeah, it's tight.
My notes. Okay, cold open. I'm in.
Like, all right,
You do a fucking cold open right there. All right.
There's some shit going on. There's some above average stakes. There's galactic conflict. I know I'm in for some Jeffrey Combs and some Susie Plaxton unexpectedly. Let's go.
How fun. And I'm trying to think of any other examples I have there. I mean, and I hate bringing up the fucking Voyager Q episodes, but it's rare in Trek to actually get multiple well-regarded, seasoned, confident guest stars competing with each other in scenes.
Yeah.
You can get you can get a space Boddicker, but then he's surrounded by Johnny Nobodies.
Right. You don't get Space Boddicker plus.
They'll go up against the main cast members, but by the end, when we've got Suval with Gary Graham, right?
Correct.
Then you got
Jeffrey Combs and Susie
Plaxton, like all playing off each other, like, and then on top of the regular cast members, that's a real rare treat. And I don't know if there's anybody else I can think of off the top of my head who would have been a good stand-in for Susie Plaxton to have that physical intimidation and the charisma and that little twinkle of chaos in her eyes that could have really done it that way. Maybe, and it would have been cool to see her in makeup. I get that she's just a director, but I actually would have been down to see Roxanne Dawson in that role.
They've always stayed away from using past Trek actors as extras or as guest actors, even
minus completely despicable, miserable fucking acquisition. What was that goddamn Ferengi episode where they
Yeah,
disgraced my
it
boy
was
Neelix.
acquisition when they dragged out Ethan Phillips
This poor
because
guy, man.
that one seemed like it made sense because he had played Ferengi before, but that seemed to be the entire rationale behind that. But you don't see like Robert Beltran, get into makeup to do these kinds of things. They typically don't do that. They go back to the guest actor to find people. And like you said, they've got some people. There's some people who are consistent hitters. DS9 again does this all the time, where they had this huge stable of guest actors that almost became pseudo regulars because they would show up all frequently, and it became an ensemble show as a consequence. Like their main cast was not nearly representative of actually who was in the show. And we've got that to look forward to. But here is Enterprise doing their best to do that, which is okay. Let's bring in some dudes. Let's make this a thing, right? Like we gotta get a good hit here. we made a night in sick bay, guys. We need to make sure this one connects. We're gonna have anyone still watching the show.
Real quick, so we got Night in Sick Bay, Precious Cargo, and I feel like there's another big fucking turkey that we've dealt with recently. Like there are some serious strikes against
Dawn
Enterprise.
Was terrible too. Like the Mortal Kombat jokes aside, that one was dog shit.
The level of uplift that the Mortal Kombat framework jokes, the service that did for Dawn, like I'm not remembering Dawn in my head nearly as bad as I should just because a fucking lizard man spit in Trip's eyes.
Right. And then Singularity was bad. The seventh was disappointing, even with Senator Kelly. Marauders. Like none of this went well.
We're here watching because we're having fun with it. We're going out of our way to make these somehow fun to talk about after they were not fun to watch. Go back to your earlier comment. Nobody is sitting around with their friend doing an hour discussion for every single one of these episodes. Podcasts didn't exist back then. Who the fuck stuck around till episode 15? Like, I would love to know what the viewership numbers look. There's not even, in the memory alpha for this, there isn't even a reception tab. There's a couple quotes. There's some bullshit background stuff. Nothing really juicy that I saw in there. And then normally they have like ratings, reviews, and critical reception. That's not even in there.
Right. It's just becoming barely a blip on the radar at this point.
So we skip past the credits, like you do.
And you wind up in what had to be the most weird phone call that these two men have ever had to have, which is Admiral Forrest and Captain Archer, where Forrest is like, "Yo, John, you will never believe what has just happened. For the very first time in the lives of anyone present, the Vulcans are asking for our help, specifically your help."
And then Jonathan Archer is like, "Well, Admiral Forrest, you're not going to believe what I have to tell you. And it's that I have broken out of whatever fever dream coma I have been trapped in for the past 15 episodes. And I have decided to actually show up for work today with my game face on and not be a entitled, petulant, whiny bitch, worst captain ever.
I am not going to be the Jonathan Archer that brings my dog down to our random alien planet and then gets fucking pissed when he pees on something and I have to do a penance ritual as a consequence. I'm going to be the Captain Archer that actually resembles the man you'd send out on the very first deep space mission because he's willing to, be the intrepid Vasco da Gama of Earthlings. Like I'm gonna show some of that for a change. What a delight. But yeah, Archer decides, okay, apparently I'm going to go be a diplomat. So let's get on with it. Run the engines hot. We got to get ourselves to this planet.
He doesn't know why he's being summoned. All he knows is that Ambassador Suval, right?
Yes, Ambassador Suval. Well, at this point, I think he just knows that the Vulcans want his help. I don't think he knows it's Suval. Or at least I don't think it's ever mentioned that like Suval asked for him.
They're like, hey, we got to go. And it's exactly what you said. they are running the engines hot enough to the point where there's I would say if there is a B plot here, it's that Trip's worried the engines are going to get fucked up.
Yeah. It's like, we're running on the red line here, guys. Like,
yeah,
this is rough.
We're running at 120, and the snapback from to Paul is like, well, they're rated to run 130, so chill out. I like the edge that T'Pol is clearly on through this entire episode. This is a big deal to the Vulcans. They don't really call it out, but it's certainly present in my memory as she goes through. She's going to come under some pretty heavy criticism by some Vulcan muckety mucks. And this is hot on the heels of her just being diagnosed as like
having Vulcan AIDS, basically.
Not even just Vulcan AIDS, but being like Vulcan second class citizen through and through. Like, she's already on thin ice after her speaking out against the High Council, which does get brought up in this.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I really feel like if this episode missed anything, it was that her new diseased status and being, well, I guess it'd be poor form to throw the mind meld that she was not a willing participant in her face, but that she's not dunked on at all for being sick and like.
Well, though, I guess was it clear that that information was transmitted to the high command? Because the doctor had it, he had the authority to pull her card, but it never said like, yeah, we told everybody that you have it. So I don't know if that has maybe not actually widely known. I have to go back and listen to our episode to see if we
I think you got to go back and watch the actual episode because we didn't discuss the end ramifications of that at all.
Yeah, but let us presume for a moment perhaps the reason why Saval does not bring it up is that he does not personally know.
That would be a big gold star in the book of that Vulcan regent doctor who was quite the bitch, the evil bitch. But I think it's possible if they fully endorse the fact that she had been victimized, then yeah, maybe spreading around her problems would be considered dirty. Let's assume it's a secret still, and that's a plausible reason why it was not discussed further.
Until it is brought up again, we will assume that it is not common knowledge.
But, so they burn the candle at both ends to get Enterprise there as fast as possible, and it turns out that it's a hurry up and wait scenario. Vulcans are leaving the humans hanging. Trip's complaining that he almost blew the warp core out to get there, only to be told to wait. And eventually, Saval comes over to Enterprise, right?
In the meantime, Archer does get the brief so that, the audience has context, which is this is all a beef over a planet that was a Class D and therefore uninhabitable moon-sized planet that the Andorians elected to put a colony on after terraforming it to make it fit for life. And the Vulcans took exception to this act because it was a planet strategically located near Vulcan itself. So they felt like it was just something they did so they could have a military base nearby. And it did not end up a fun negotiation. In the end, there was a deal that was struck, it says in 2097. So it's been this way since about 50, 60 years.
2097 is only a couple of years from now.
And it's true. And we might live that long. Yeah, probably not. And
so while the so-called World War III was raging on Earth, a real war of death and loss was actually taking place on whatever fucking planet this was.
And most importantly, the Vulcans ended up forcing the Andorians off. They just shipped them in like refugee ships and like get the fuck off this planet. And it did not end with honor for the Andorians. And as we have seen in Shran's other two appearances, he likes to start shit with the Vulcans. He's a big proponent of starting shit with the Vulcans. Apparently, when the Andorian Imperial Council wants to send someone to kick sand in their eye, they send fucking Shran. And so that time that clock has struck 12 once more, and here's Shran with a bunch of dudes trying to hold it down in this old colony that's been abandoned for decades.
So again, the political situation here, Vulcan declared that their territory, right?
Correct. But did not inhabit it. And then the Andorians showed up, terraformed it, and declared it their
Went
territory.
out of their way to terraform an inhospitable planet. And by the way, to Paul phrases it, the proximity to Vulcan is like Earth to Pluto, right?
That's the comparison she draws. Like, what would you feel like if another species created a colony on Pluto?
I don't think they ever really give the Andorians a solid foot to stand on in terms of why they did actually establish a colony on an inhospitable planet. It's like, to terraform it, like, had they said, listen, there's great mining opportunity here for an energy source that we use that the Vulcans ignore, like, I think that would have lent a lot of credibility to not painting Andorians in the antagonistic light that they kind of look like in this background story.
They rely a little bit too much on the Vulcans forced us off and were mean about it as like making the Andorians look okay.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, that's not doing enough work. Like, there had to be some other reason why they did this other than clear military advantage for it not to be interpreted that way, which
quick exchange is what I need there. Is like,
yeah,
we came here because of the mining opportunity that you ignored, and we need that energy source. And then Suval could have been like, there were dozens of planets that would have been easier to colonize. You picked this one because of military
then it becomes
strategy.
ambiguous, right? You don't want a solid answer one way or another. You just
Right.
want the audience to be like,
I need
okay,
slippery
so there's a
slopes.
Yeah, there's this reasonable line, and then there's the reason why it could be interpreted differently. That's what you want to set up. It is when Saval and his dude, who's just a guy, he's a Vulcan guy,
Vulcan death stare.
When they show up, that's when Archer learns it is specifically Shran that is on the surface that has called for him, and so he's like, oh, okay, I get it now. I get it now. This guy and I have had a couple run-ins in the past, and I can see why my name has been picked out of this particular hat, because Saval is like, I didn't want you here. He's very antagonistic. Like, you are not adding to this circumstance. I would prefer you be far, far away. But apparently, this guy wants you to be the mediator. So it's going to be you.
I like how Archer walks away from the table as Suval's laying cards on it. And he gets that like shitty look, and it's just like, oh, I have the upper hand here. I'm going to rub my butt in his face.
Just a bit. Like, and in an appropriate way, though. Like, it's not petulant. I'm not, like, when he insists on Vulcan Death Stare going down with him, he doesn't say, no, I don't want no Vulcans with me. I don't want to do things because my dad died and I want to do that thing. Like, it's none of that. It's instead, I'm not going to do that because clearly Shran doesn't trust Vulcans, but if you really want me to take a Vulcan, I'm going to take the one that he knows.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's done him a solid, because that's how I'm going to maintain trust with him, because I'm a diplomat right now. It's like,
and also,
smart.
You're not my boss. I'm here to be an impartial mediator. I'm not taking my orders from you. And we're going to try and do this thing by the book. This is the most generous portrayal of... We were just talking the other day, like, what is the right Archer? How should Archer be acting? Who is Enterprise Archer supposed to be? And it's this guy here. This is the first time I can give you a clear answer. Like, this is the guy that they have needed in this show the entire fucking time. This is the guy who finally showed up for work.
Yeah.
So they're getting ready to go down, and they're loading up into the shuttlecraft. It's going to be T'Pol, it's going to be Archer, and Trip is seeing them off on their way down. And he's like, hey, I don't know about this. And there's a really good speech in there. No, I'm sorry. They're getting ready to go down, but Archer has to get a chemical treatment because it's an inhospitable climate. Yeah, Vulcans are immune to it.
Yeah, that's why Phlox gets to get a scene in here where he's like, Captain, I don't know if you know this, but I was in the military as a medic, and battlefields are unpredictable places where one should not improvise. Like, they can be chaotic, and deadly, and you should be very careful. Which
Especially if there's a ceasefire. Like, that's when it's the most dangerous.
it's all this tension, and it's like a great thing for Phlox to put in. Again, a bit of his background. He's seen some things. He's got, his serenity comes from acceptance rather than naivety, which I think is an important part of his character. And he imparts wisdom to his captain to say, be very fucking careful about what you're about to go do. It can break bad very quick.
I don't know if it's his conversation with Phlox or if it's a conversation with Trip. But he busts out this line and he's like, maybe we're not just out here to chart stars and comets. Maybe humanity is out here maybe we're out here to prove that humans are ready to join a bigger galactic community. And basically he starts
says that
to
to Phlox. Yeah.
unfold the Constitution of the Federation on the floor. And like, I become physically excited. Like, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. This is what we're here for. It's about fucking time. Like, this is the first time that we have really directly started talking about the United Federation of Planets. And it's
like, why are humans like, this is the story that Enterprise can tell, right? Like, humans are clearly the first among equals of the Federation. They
technologically inferior.
But for whatever reason, they are considered the leaders of the Federation, right? They are. They absolutely are. They're portrayed that way. They're positioned that way.
They make up the majority of Starfleet, which is the most visible expression of the Federation.
And there's a lot of planets, and humans clearly treat everyone, with the respect that being part of the same organization brings, but they are the ones running the show. And there's a reason for that, right? Like, they decide there's a story reason for this. And this is the very first seed that gets planted as to why.
That's my big regret, having watched this and knowing that we're only going to get 4 episodes. Like, will we be there for the actual foundation of the Federation?
Or 4 seasons, you mean?
Yeah.
So, I don't want to spoil too much, but I feel like the show, when it chooses its endpoint, chooses it quite well for this. Like, this story becomes the story in season 4, right? Like, this right here, this is what season 4 is, which is why it's amazing. And when they finally bring this arc to an end, because they knew the end was coming.
Mm-hmm.
They knew when they were getting into producing season 4, they're like, this could just be it. They want to get to 5, but they know what's gonna happen, and it could be that they just get told that there's going to be no more after this. And so when they made season 4, they created an ending that makes a perfect sense for, like, you get to see clearly where things are going from this point forward. Then they do one more episode that's real dog shit, famously so, and we'll obviously have a great time.
Season 5 was supposed to be the Romulan War, and I suppose the Federation would already have to be established.
Well, no. So the lore of Star Trek is the Romulan War causes the Federation to be formed, and that's why they wanted to end there, which was they set up all of these pieces in season 4, and then you have season 5, which is the final, like, confrontation that leads all of these races to determine that they must in fact form this compact and build a better future for the galaxy together. It made a lot of sense when you start to see where they were going, but they knew they weren't going to get there, so they found a different end spot within that timeline without changing anything. That's like, yeah, this is perfect. You can just stop here, and I don't need to see anything else.
I wonder if anybody was like, man, too bad we wasted all that time in season 1 and 2 fucking around.
I mean, especially season 2. Like, a lot of the season 1, like, fucking around makes sense because it's your first fucking season.
Sure.
And then season 3, like, I feel like they also want to mulligan a little bit because they went too far into the serialization at a certain point where the whole season's one story arc, right? Like, it's a lot and it'll be fun for us to review because we'll be consuming it in a way that no one else got to.
Yeah.
But, like, the season 4, they got to the sweet spot, which was do these 3 episode arcs one after another with, like, 1 episode breaks in between as a way to tell larger stories without making it so that people can't follow the fuck is going on if they just, like, randomly showed up in the middle of the season. And it really it works. It works a lot really well. But we're talking way into our futures, Peter. Let's talk
There's
about
still a
right
lot
now.
more season poo to get through.
We do.
So Archer sees a bigger picture. Archer understands the stakes and he sees a potential payoff. And
This is a purpose, which is
right.
very important.
There's a gold ring to grab here, and Archer's going to go after it. So he gets in the shuttlecraft. They fly down. He catches a little bit of flack from T'Pol, who we have already mentioned is very on edge. She's like, hey, did you look at the material I sent you? He's like, yeah, I glanced at it. And she's like, this is a big fucking deal. There's a lot of hurt asses about what's going on here. This is a no-win situation. Everybody is very unhappy.
Archer,
you need to
Archer
take this
bites
serious.
Back the right way to say, I was up till 2:00 in the morning reading what you sent.
It's a 1,200-page document.
Yeah. I only have so much time. Like, I got through as much as I could before we had to go for this. So we went for it, Relax.
They get down, they land, they're out, they're exploring. The Andorians have a jamming signal, so no communication from surface to planet or to orbit. And even guidance systems don't work. They have landing coordinates. They're going in effectively blind. They land, they come out, they're like, hey, what's up? And then the Andorians do what they do best, and that's pop out of the side hatch with guns drawn.
Yes. So Susie Plaxton and friends corral all of them. And Archer is like, no, this Vulcan's great. Did a solid for your boss. So why don't we go talk to him? And they have the first little negotiation, which is...
No, hold on. Even before that, we get a return of the Andorian black bag. Andorians love putting black hoods on people.
They have a fetish
got a little.
for it. Hey.
It doesn't directly tie into Archer's fetish of getting beaten, but I would say that between the Andorians' tight black outfits and Archer's love of getting punched in the mouth, we've got a real S&M vibe going here, right?
Yeah, especially Susie Plaxton, being the statuesque Amazonian that she is, looks mighty fine in these Andorian battle garb. Looks like you're going to go battle in an S&M club.
The amount of skull cap they had to put on to contain all of her hair, like her head looks like a pumpkin. It's very off-putting.
It's a lot, but the rest is like, geez, okay.
Yeah, sure is.
They got you in that, all right.
Yep. So they pull him off to go visit old Shran for a nice little reunion there.
I like the tension between him and Shran, and between Archer and Shran, in that they know each other, so they're not going to stone cold fuck each other, but they're also not, this is tense. This is a weird situation. Archer's there because Shran has put him in the middle of it, and they're both aware of that. And, maybe there's a bit of Shran trying to give Archer a chance to uplift humanity's position in this. Like, he's probably aware of, this is a big deal for you. The Vulcans sent you down here. This is a big deal. So well, let's talk. Let's deal. You owe me for putting you in this position a little bit because you're going to use it.
Right. And the same way that Archer shot down Suval's attempt to puppet him.
Yeah.
Shran's like, I want take my message to the Vulcans. I want a full withdrawal, and I want rights to this area. I want reparations.
Yeah.
I want a fucking cherry sundae with sprinkles on top. And Archer's like, this is bullshit. This is unattainable. I'm not going to waste my fucking time bringing this ridiculous shit over there because you know what the results are going to be. We need to do this a different way. The old ways have not worked. They're not going to work this time. Let's try something constructive. And Shran settles on, I'm willing to talk, but I want to talk here on my terms, and I want Suval to come in person as a show of good faith. I really expect, and obviously it's clear why they don't, but I was surprised that they didn't elect to have these conversations on Enterprise's neutral ground.
And they ultimately do at the end. Spoiler.
Yes.
but it makes sense that it occurs at that point because of the rest of the episode. But yeah, the pitch Archer makes is, tell you what, I'll get Saval to come down to talk to you, but you need to give me one of your 3 hostages to demonstrate good faith. He asks, he over asks and then, negotiates to one in the most telegraphed, sort of 3, no 2, no 1 sort of like back and forth moment. But it does the job, which is, you need to give me something to go back to my ship to tell Saval this is what it's going to take to solve this
We're
problem.
all being reasonable now.
And if you do that, then that gives me the credibility necessary to go to him to say he's got to, right?
So they fly back up with a Vulcan prisoner. Archer's like, hey, here's what we need to do. Saval balks at it. And eventually Archer is able to convince him, like, you keep saying it's the Andorians that are being unreasonable, but here you are unwilling to even engage in direct dialogue. Put up or shut up. And Saval surprisingly acquiesces and agrees to go down to the surface.
If there is a bit of damage to the armor of this episode, it is when they cut back to the surface and have a scene between Susie Plaxton and Shran. He's like, setting up to receive them, and she is clearly resistant to peace. And so when the inevitable plot twist happens, it's like, gosh, I wonder who amongst these Andorians could possibly be the leader of the faction that is opposed to Shran wanting to have a negotiated settlement. I don't know. Could it be the giant woman who I've seen before? Could that be it?
I give the episode more credit, and I'll get into that later. I was certainly hoping, I was like, I saw the breadcrumbs, and I'm like, man, they're leading me to believe that she is going to be the Judas of this group and stab Shran in the back and try to undermine him. I hope she does. I always like an irredeemable, attractive villainess.
It's true, especially the heavy eyebrows. It's a big thing here.
We'll see what happens. They get in the shuttle, they fly down. Now, it was a Mortal Kombat episode, right? Just came out, and I saw some feedback, some people talking. It was actually Dahaka Jack, and he challenged
Dr.
me.
Jack. Yeah.
Challenged me about how many doors there were on the shuttles, because I had criticized that these fucking shuttle pods are ridiculous. They've got 2 side doors in this fucking rear hatch, and like, why would you bother having a hatch that you have to walk down a ladder to get into if you've got side doors, right? That was the big criticism from Dawn.
Then he just pulled it right out like he had it in a folder ready to just
He's like, well, you need to have that nose hatch that flips up so you could dock. And I'm like, I don't think that's right, because there's a tube that extends. I don't think that's where the tube is. So I sat there crawling through Dawn, trying to find as many good camera angles I could. And I even went back into what was the spider people, Fight or Flight, right?
Yes.
Where they
Mm-hmm.
they show the shuttle pod docking with the spider web ship and the tube coming out. I spent a lot of time scrubbing through footage to try and find those screenshots supporting the fact that there's like, in fact, 4 different ways to get. There's the 2 side doors. Then comes this episode, which is basically shuttle porn. You see so much of the exterior of the shuttle during this flight with Saval because they crash and they're flying in. There's weapons fire from the surface. It dings the shuttlecraft. It crash lands. You get all these great top-down shots. You see the docking hatch. You see the flip-up nose cone. You see the side doors. It's everything I could have asked for. To me, it was very satisfying seeing that, given how hard I had to look for the other stuff. But yes, these shuttlecraft are ridiculous. Way too many doors. Way too many seals. I was right. Jack was wrong. Jack said that it was, and you wanted this guy to be the judge on us to see how, when,
Archadish, yes.
Yeah. To be able to sacrifice us to the fucking intro when we were wrong on things. I think Jack should have to watch the intro for him being wrong about where that docking cone is.
You know what? I can go for that, Jack. You know what you must do. We want evidence that you've paid the penance. for your failures. I mean,
I need
it's
pictures of your face where you tried to claw your own eyes out from watching the intro because you didn't know where the docking hatch was on the shuttle.
you're an MD, man. You can treat your own wounds. Yeah, it's
Just have
like,
the hydrogen peroxide on hand and,
yeah,
and
I
everything will be
try. I
fine.
believe in your ability to recover.
So they get gunned down flying in. I Suval, I think, comes off as maybe the most interesting character in this episode.
Yeah,
We
you
get
get to know a lot more about him.
a
Yeah,
lot of good back. Suval, up to this point, has been this monolithic prick that has only been there to cock block and party poop.
yeah. He's
He
he's a representation of Vulcan authority that is seen as the bad guy as far as Archer's interpretation of him is. And this is the first time where he expresses himself on his own terms, that you get to know something about his background, about how he came to be, how old he is, which is considerable. And obviously, at the end, a noticeable change in opinion, that he is not monolithic, that he's not unreasonable, which is important as well.
Well, it's all front loaded too, because the initial agreement to go down to the surface into a, for all intents and purposes, active war zone. Part of me wants to say he caved a little too easy in agreeing to Archer's terms to go down in these rickety ass. I can only assume that the Vulcan shuttles are way better than Enterprise's shuttle pod.
You would have to assume all their stuff is better than human stuff.
So the top dog agreeing to fly down to the surface in uh,
A hoopty.
an ice cream truck, basically.
Yes.
Pretty ballsy. But at the same time, I think that it's a calculated decision, and ultimately this guy wants there to be some sort of progress, and he's willing to take this risk, right?
Right, because he's a diplomat. He is an ambassador. This is his job.
And I think that plays in well to Fallen Heroes, which was, what's this dude's name? Chris Black?
Yeah, which was another episode with a Vulcan ambassador.
Who's willing to ride or die.
Right.
So that's an interesting parallel between these, is that, yeah, these guys, they get this heroic status, but it's kind of deserved. These are
they got to put it on
badass.
the line. They got to, think back to when it was Sarek on TNG, right? The Sarek episode where he's at the end of his ability to function, but he is going to do everything in his power to ensure he can deliver one more W for the diplomatic service in the galaxy up. And if that means he's got to shoulder the burden of a degenerative neurological disease, he's going to do it. And then, obviously, the story is amazing because Picard ends up taking on a lot of that trauma for himself so that Saval can complete that mission, but he's still there to do it because Sarek is a diplomat. He's an ambassador. He's ride or die. This is literally to the very end.
Followed on to Spock, another hero who goes balls deep in trying to reunify the Vulcan Romulan rift in, was that called reunification?
Yeah, reunification 1 and 2.
So ambassador kind of seems like a not a hard ass title. I think maybe they should have rebranded ambassador to something a little bit more imperious.
Well, it makes sense though that the Vulcans would just merely call it an ambassador.
I know,
but that culturally it means something more than it does to, a political appointment that it is for humans.
They could have called it Avatar or something. I don't know. They get shot down. They crash land. Archer keeps it together. And Saval's like, well, that did not work out. Do you see now who you're dealing with? This is why we don't engage on these terms. Thanks for trying. Now it's time to get the fuck out of here before we get zapped. And then Archer's like, no, we're going to push forward and I'm going to meet this guy. I don't believe it was on his order that we were shot down. I think there's still a chance to salvage this. And then it's kind of like Saval's like, oh, okay, I guess I'll go along with you after all, instead of being like, no, dude, you're fucking wrong. And enough's enough. We're going to split here.
He delivers a great line that helps sell it for me, which is, Shran is the kind of man who could not sleep because he thought he owed me something. He is not shooting us down. You know, like that worked super well for me to like understand how that could have spoken to Saval. Right? Like that's the language Saval can understand, which is like I know who this guy is. I'm not saying we're boys. I'm not saying we're friends. I'm saying this is a man who is so obsessed with his honor that the fact that he owed me a debt made it so he could not sleep.
Yeah, but Suval thinks that Archer's a fucking idiot, though. Like, by the end, Suval's got, and again, tying back into Fallen Heroes, there is this banding ability that the Vulcans seem to have, where if like I'm a Vulcan and you're a Vulcan, and you tell me, hey, we're gonna trust guy 3, I assimilate your trust for that person very easily, right?
Right.
Vulcan to Vulcan advice goes a long way. We had it in Fallen Hero. We're going to get it here once T'Pol weighs in on her true feelings about archers, but that didn't happen quite yet. At this point in the episode, I think that there's a couple different ways that the plot could genuinely work out, because we've had some good fake outs, specifically back on Catwalk, where we thought the Ponytail Gang was going to be the crooks, and really, they introduced the space fascists who turned out to in fact be, pretty solid Nazis. I want to jump back to Catwalk real quick too. We didn't give them props then, but like those space Nazis, like what a rare showing for the show to be able to like portray adept functional villains that you did not want to relate with.
Yeah, like the captain in particular, I think we called out for special attention of like, this dude seems like a real evil man who's also smart. Like,
yeah, but it's not
loses,
like Colonel.
He doesn't lose because he fucks up. He loses because he got beat. Different.
But I'm just saying, like, unlike Kurt Grot and some of these other, quote unquote bad guys, it's not like, oh, Archer's being unreasonable and now we're like, oh no, yeah, this dude said like, we're impounding your shit and you're going to be fucking executed for letting people on your ship under a fucking political asylum or whatever. Anyways, I'm thinking, okay, well, they've got a couple of play out or fake outs up their sleeve at this point. I think there's a 50-50 chance that just as easily as it was legitimately Andorians that shot him down, probably under Susie Plaxton's orders, that it could have been the Vulcan Death Star evil captain or some other member of the Vulcan group that doesn't want peace either, and would dare to shoot him down, which
real
I guess would go
real Star Trek 6 situation potentially.
Right, R.I.P. Christy Alley.
Well, R.I.P. Christy Alley, but she wasn't in that. And then Christopher Plummer died too, somewhat recently, if I recall. So we've lost some people from that movie.
Yeah. But I think both of these are legit, and I think they do a good job holding up the element of suspense for as long as they do. But Archer, again, actually being a competent captain, goes off, does some quick recon trying to figure things out. And it's at this point that we are able to see Suval drop his shields. And jumping back into our vampire days, right?
Mm-hmm.
Especially playing Tremere, like there was the image that you would project to outsiders, but as soon as you were around your own kind, then you become a different person.
Yeah, for people who don't know, when we did our LARP thing, the group that our characters, Peter and I's characters, were aligned in were a bunch of insular vampire wizards with we say, unrelentingly fierce bureaucracy and internal politics. And what he's describing is the need to present one's way when you're hanging out with everyone else and when it's time to bring the knives out because you're in your internal meetings.
Well,
which, by the way, Peter and I were really fucking good at that. That's how we became friends.
Very modest. No, not the knives coming out, but like the act gets dropped a little bit.
Yeah.
Archer runs off and Saval like kind of turns and like drops a lot of the hard assness, and he's like, "Come on, T'Pol, what are you doing? You were one of my best. And had you stayed on the Enclave on Earth, you probably would have your own diplomatic assignment by now. Like, you're really doing yourself a disservice. I had such high hopes for you. You could have been way ahead of the game. And she's like, I know, but what I think we're doing here is worth it. I think that there's value that you're still not realizing about the humans. I think that there is a lot more here for us all to learn. And I think this all kind of starts off with her saying something and Suval commenting that she's picked up a human accent.
Yeah, that her in her use of the Vulcan language, she now has a human accent.
And I really enjoy the candor between them. And again, in establishing Suval as a person and not just a figure, it's interesting to see him talk with his guard down a little bit. We also find out very quickly Suval knows his way around this place. He was part of the initial occupational force as part of Vulcan intelligence, I believe.
Yeah, a century prior is what he says.
So this dude's got a lot of skin in the game as to what's going to happen on the planet here. And I think it's not a stretch to say that, like, he's taking things personal.
While things are going on the planet, we do have a bit of space action, which is there is a ticking clock element because a bunch of Andorian battlecruisers are going to show up. And of course, there's already Vulcan ships on the scene. And that inevitably would put them in conflict with each other in one way or another because those ships would try to resupply the troops and then they try to stop. So that will definitely have this break out into something resembling general warfare, which Archer is trying everything in his power to stop. So Trip, who's presently in command of Enterprise, decides once this ticking clock has wound down to the spot where they're about to meet is like the only way forward is for me to literally put the ship between all of these ships that can blow us up and say, nah, I'm going to have one hand on your forehead. I'm going to have one hand on your forehead and be like, you're not fighting right now. And I'm just going to bank on the fact that none of you want to cause me as a casualty to make this work. And it's actually really good on Trip's part because we've seen him struggle with command before. This, he's got all the confidence. He's like, red alert, lock the phasers. We're committing to the bid immediately. Like, there's no question. We're doing this. Like, this is what the captain wants. This is what the captain's going to get. And we're going to handle it.
Here's what's absent. He is not an emotional wreck.
Yeah. He's
the last time that we dealt with this was Shadows of Pajem, and him getting real flustered and emotional and falling apart as the Vulcan commanders were like, no, we're not going to involve you. Because this is basically the same thing, right?
Right.
The captain goes down to the surface of an Andorian controlled area. They lose track of it. And the Vulcans come along and say, we're the adults. You're going to sit at the children's table and we're going to take care of it. And last time, he's like tripping over himself, getting flustered, lying this. And this time it's at stone cold confidence to the point where he starts writing a book that is going to become the Picard playbook later in TNG. Like, this is peak Picard right here, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to endanger everybody in the name of peace. And I'm going to go to diplomatic great heights to insert ourselves into a situation. So I'm going to risk our lives so everybody can live. Great. Trip gets A+ for everything that he's doing up here. Cut back down to the surface. Somewhere in there, there's a good joke about Vulcan's ears being pointy. Suval calling it out once Archer's gone again. Like, why do they keep bringing up our ears? I don't know. I think they're envious.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that. There's reinforcements.
Yeah, the Andorians spring a trap on Archer, T'Pol, and Suval, such that Archer's plan is, I'm going to give Suval my gun. I am then going to sneak around the back, and I'm going to get the quick time event where I get to do either lethal takedown or I get to do non-lethal takedown by sneaking up and hit Q or V, or whatever, and I'm gonna hit Q because I'm trying to keep my non-kill streak for the achievement alive on this playthrough, and take these guys down.
Very merciful Solid Snake Archer
It was,
doing some
hey,
tactical espionage.
bam, tactical punch to the face.
There's scenes in here with Shran where he is informed that the shuttle went down. And this is an opportunity for the episode to reinforce that Shran is a good guy. Shran did not order this. Again, we're still, is it Vulcan? Is it a Vulcan plot to espionage, just whatever? Unfortunately, as Shran's reinforcing to Tara / Susie Plaxton, like, make sure he gets here safe. She's like, you can count on me, boss. And he walks away, and then they fucking lay the sinister music on her. I'm like, excellent. She is evil. So,
dun dun dun.
Yeah, as Archer's group gets pinned down by some fire, and Archer sneaks off to go Solid Snake it, I was not surprised to actually see Andorians shooting Andorian guns and not Vulcans shooting Andorian guns. I'm like, good. There's going to be a Susie Plaxton fight here. I'm very happy. He knocks him out. He gets up higher to the sniper perch where we've got Susie Plaxton shooting from a pretty good advantage point with a pistol, which is ridiculous. But he's got the gun on her. He goes, put your hands up. The jig is up. I don't know how these guns work or if this even has a stun setting, but, you're done. And she's like, we don't have stun settings on our guns. I guess you got me. Why are you doing it? Why would you do this?
And we get the standard, some of us want to fight for it kind of response, right? Like some of us want to like to throw hands. So we're going to throw hands. And I don't like that Shran is getting, all responsible in his desire to talk things through. Fuck that.
Classic Star Trek. I mean, How many episodes of TNG and whatever has there been? The person who is not willing to let bygones be bygones and perpetuate the centuries-old fight.
Yeah, because they like it. It's comfortable. It's warm. It's where they like to live. They like to live throwing hands with the Vulcans, and that's what they want to get down to.
Now, TNG, do you remember the episode where there was the girl that was genetically engineered to, like, kill everybody from that one line and she never aged or whatever?
I forget this one.
Well, whatever. They stun her a few times. Like, normally in TNG, when you find, like, especially if it's a woman who's, like, the remnant of the old guard that doesn't want to let bygones be bygones, worst case scenario, they get stunned and put in their place. Susie Plaxton ain't going down like that, though.
No. Archer, unfortunately, steps into a little sinkhole in the set, and it causes him to wildly throw his gun away as he stumbles. Like, yeah! Just like flees from his hands, which means
he rolls a 1. That's what that is. That's a 1.
Critical botch on keeping a handle on the old gat, and that leads us to a fight scene, which it's a fun little fight scene. There's some very kinetic things that they do.
They go back and forth. I actually could have gone with Archer getting his ass beat a little bit more. Of all the scenes where Archer should get manhandled, punched in the mouth, and really take a solid loss, like, this is it. Everything that we've seen about the Andorians, specifically this Imperial Guard, is that these are well-seasoned badasses who do this shit every day. Archer holding his own seems a little silly to me, and I think there would have been some good head injuries for him to have. Unfortunately, he doesn't take that big of a loss. He's not able to get fully erect by the beating.
Not a lot of blows to the forehead. No.
Susie Plaxton finishes him off with that terrible swinging jump kick that the little girl does in The Lost World, where she kicks the raptor out of the window.
Yeah, it's like some real Gymkhana shit. It's not.
She
it does
kicks
not
him
fit.
Down a hole. He crawls up, and wouldn't you know it, that's the exact moment where everybody else shows up. Shran shows up with his Imperial Guard, guns out. Suval comes up with T'Pol, and this is going to be the moment of reckoning. And it turns into a nice game of he said, she said, with Susie Plaxton saying,
basically, Susie Plaxton's, what do you think? I'd betray you? What do you mean? I've served you for years. And Archer is like, listen, I told you I was going to bring Suval to you. Do you think I shot him with an Andorian weapon? Use your brain, bud. Use your noggin. Put it together here. You know exactly what went down. We tried to bring him. We got shot down. He got shot. I had to get into a fight with your lieutenant. There was the Jim Cotta moment. I got a nosebleed because I got a little bit of a head wound, but not enough that it, that I
I
need
was
to
telling
excuse
her,
myself.
punch me in the face. She'd only punch me in the stomach. I'm only like half hard. I'm blue balling hard here. Listen, man, I got real sacrifice and woe. Nobody's coming out of this thing happy.
And Shran is colored as reasonable. He puts it together and is like, I'm disappointed in you. Arrest her, and then why don't we square this up?
I would have liked to see the other guards betray him as well and throw an allegiance with her and have like a little bit more gunfight where I don't know. I guess they kind of played that card back on Shadows of Pajem where
this is enough.
Jumped in front of it.
It's not what the episode's about. They had a little bit of this, but like the point here is we are furthering the understanding of Andorians and Vulcans and their conflict. We're showing Shran as someone who wants to start shit, but also is willing to be reasonable. We see Saval as being willing to go in on whatever's necessary to make the deal. We see Archer coming through and being able to broker that and weave between both worlds. We've accomplished all of that. We don't need to. We get what happened here. We've delivered on the premise. Now we can have the payoff, And they do. They Trip gets one more moment of glory where he's willing to like commit to his bit, like open fire, like open fire on the Vulcan vessels that are moving towards I wasn't fucking around. And then he gets a message from Archer and be like, no, don't do that, bud. And it's they're coming down because they've been asked to.
I did like the smirk on Reed's face when Trip calls for the tactical alert.
Yeah, he's like, that shit I did when I was being super bitchy, you got it, boss. Mm-hmm. Weird.
Here comes the OCD alert. They all fly up. They're up in the conference room. The scene opens with Shran rejecting everything and being clearly pissed off with what's been put on the table. Saval countering that he's not really happy either. Archer drops the classic line on that, a good compromise is one where nobody leaves the negotiations happy.
Yeah. Mutual dissatisfaction.
Mm-hmm. And then they push forward.
There's going to be more negotiations. Mm-hmm. This is the first step. There's the situation is unresolved, but it will be now continued to be spoken of, which is probably what they're intending, which was push their shit in a little bit and let's get this back on the table.
Shran offers to toast to his dissatisfaction, his mutual dissatisfaction. I like Suval's like, Vulcans don't drink, but he quickly reads the room and goes, but in this case, I think it's warranted. The four of them share a drink. Archer seems pretty happy with whatever he's drinking. On his way out, Suval throws a little backhanded compliment. Archer, you've been, how do you put it? Less than meddlesome?
Yeah, your presence hasn't been less than meddlesome. It was like the most backhanded compliment he could provide, but it was definitely still something he did specifically to compliment him, which was, just turning around a little bit on you here, bud. You did pretty good. Don't like you. He says that like I think he likes you. Nah, I wouldn't go that far.
That's my favorite line of the whole thing. Yeah. Is he takes off Shran and goes, "Oh, I think he likes you, pink skin." And then Archer's like, "Well, I wouldn't go that far." And I was like, "Man, there wasn't a cheesy line that made me cringe. Like everything was good, beginning to end. This is the highest concentration of good that I've seen out of Enterprise." And it was really good as a result.
It was genuinely good because of the nature of the content, because of the quality of what it allowed the invested viewer to understand about the Alpha Quadrant, about these species that we know are big deals, that become part of the Federation, and what are humans up to here? What role do they have to play here? And what is the ideal version of Archer? What is the ideal version of T'Pol? What is the ideal version of Trip? Oh, well, let's just see all of that, right? Like, let's just see them. We did. We got to see all of that, and it was awesome.
I liked it. Yep. Let's see if they can keep up a good thing. Next episode we're moving into is going to be season 2, episode 16, Future Tense. There is some burned up looking shuttlecraft. Enterprise finds a small craft, apparently from the future, adrift in space, and both the Suluban and the mysterious Tholians are intent on retrieving it. Hey, did you have fun with this premise that you came to Enterprise for? Well, too bad. Here's some more bullshit from the temporal Cold War.
So the temporal Cold War continues to be quite a drag on the show, but I will say that this episode individually represents one of the more interesting Star Trek sci-fi elements of it.
We're going French, huh?
It's interesting. There's a very interesting thing that this plot is going to center around, and what it does and how they decide to portray that within the episode that provides this specific temporal Cold War installment as particularly like fun to watch. So we'll see if that holds up. That's what my memory, is telling me. So we'll find out together here shortly.
Well, I'm riding high. I hope it continues on as we continue trekking through season 2.
I agree, sir, and we will be here with all of you next week for that trek. See you then.